Hello, everyone, and welcome to the mid-conference discussion panel. I'm here with some of our great PLN experts, and we've had a chance to check out the first round of presentations, and we're just going to take some time to talk about what we've seen and what has been great. So we'll do some quick introductions, and then we'll get talking. My name is Katie Tuppel, and I am one of the co-founders of ELL. Take some time to talk about what we've seen as a ELD specialist in Portland, Oregon. Larry, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Larry Ferlazzo. I teach ELLs and other students at Luther Burbank High School in Sacramento, California.
Awesome. Valentina?
Hi, I'm Valentina Gonzalez. I'm an educational consultant in Texas, and I specialize in English learners.
Tan?
Hey, I'm Tan. I work in Vietnam, and I'm organizing with Carol virtual.
And Stephen?
Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Sofronis from Elevation Education. I was a high school foreign language teacher for a long time and now work with many of these fine people in our PLN.
Awesome. So let's start with our keynote. We had Andrea Hunigsfeld and Maria Dove, and they talked about collaboration and co-teaching. What were your thoughts on their amazing keynote presentation?
Well, a couple of thoughts from mine are, one, it was interesting hearing their thoughts about co-teaching. Two in particular struck me. One, the idea that even if you're co-teaching and you're specifically there for ELLs, really to be successful, the co-teachers need to be themselves as teachers for all of the students. And I think that's a little bit of an out-of-the-box perspective that a lot of both people who aren't co-teachers and who are co-teachers don't think about. I was also struck, and it was a good reminder, I had read about Zaretta Hammond's idea of how to make teaching and presentations culturally responsive, and it was a good reminder of what they talked about and how they organized their presentation to include the three elements of gamify, storify, and what was the other one? Gamify. What was that?
Make it
fun.
Okay, great.
I want to add to that what Larry said. The idea of us as co-teachers, if we're going in as an ESL co-teach, we should be serving all students. And that way, we share the relationship, we share the responsibility. I think that many of us do that naturally, but just embracing that as a whole is so important. Also, the three principles, gamify, make it social, storify, so interactive, and bringing that into the classroom holds so much power as well. I love those ideas.
Yeah, those are all great, and I have noted all of those as well. And I would just add two things that I have highlighted as one, that it has to be systemic, not on the fly. That's the difference between perhaps co-teaching and just chatting with someone in the hallway about what you're going to do, which is nice, but it's not going to be something that's going to be sustained, which is important. And the other piece was starting with student outcomes. I think that was the first one that they talked about, which is the whole idea of backwards planning, and doing that in a way that's kind of co-owned by both parties. I think is crucial as well. It was really, really, really well done and took a lot from it.
I also like how they always recognize that co-teaching is not easy and there will be challenges, but that it's very important to proactively plan for how you will deal with challenges. And also that they say co-teaching is not a silver bullet. It's not the perfect solution. It's definitely something that takes a lot of time and effort and really figuring out relationships in order to have that beautiful co-marriage that Andrea and Maria have together.
I made a note of that same quote, The Magic Bullet by Temple Grandin. I love that quote. And I think it's powerful that Andrea and Maria mentioned that, because we know that co-teaching is powerful. It's important for our students, but it's not the end all be all. There are many practices that are important for our instruction and important for students, and we have to embrace them all and use them when they're relevant. So I wrote that quote down, and I'm sure I'll use that quote in my instruction.
I'm already planning to share their video with a committee that we have pulling together next week to work on how we can systematize collaboration and co-teaching in our school district, because we've had some schools doing it, but it's not district wide. And it's so wonderful that gurus in the field, such as those experts, are willing to put out a free 30-minute PD that we can access and use, because it's so chock full of information, but it's at the same time so accessible. So I can't wait to just forward that link on and say, look what we have here. This is beautiful. And these people can be in the room with us as we try to figure out how we're going to move forward with our work. So let's talk about some of the other presentations that we had this morning. We had Cassandra Chapa, Katie Gardner, Sarah Said, Justin Garcia, a team of Katie DiGregorio and Catherine Newmer, and then also Beth Skelton. Who wants to start by telling us which presentation they saw and what they loved about it?
I'll start, if that's okay. I watched Katie Gardner's, and the only difficult thing about it was that there's so much information that I was trying to multitask and get everything done. So it's great to know that those are going to be available later. But as someone who was involved in a one-to-one iPad initiative way back in the day when this was a new thing, I really was impressed by the way that she talked about how to use technology as a tool rather than as the end-all be-all. Like, we have to incorporate technology because we have this stuff. She really did a great job of mixing digital and analog tools. So you saw in that video that she was having the students do a lot of writing. There was a lot of kind of art, students taking things out, manipulating them, but also using the iPads to really, I would say, if you're thinking about the whole Sammer model, substituting, augmenting, modification, and redefining, in many ways, she was having her students, she was using the iPads to redefine education. And the one example that I'll give about that, although there are many, is with Flipgrid. She was using that as something that she could get the kids to do things that they really probably wouldn't be able to do without using the technology. And then the Seesaw example, to actually use that Seesaw to read something that they had written, which is already wonderful because she can then look at the students' writing and listen to their speaking, but then to share it with parents so easily. I mean, that's really getting to that redefinition piece, which is a hard thing to do in that Sammer model. So really impressed. And just again, to reiterate, technologies, I think Noel Chomsky said, technology is like a hammer. You can use it to build something, or you can use it, a torturer can use it to hurt somebody. She's really using that tool in the right way as a way to get these students to where they need to be and bring the parents in. So I was really impressed by that. I'd recommend everybody check that out. Whether you're using iPads or not, I think other technology as well, there's a lot there.
And I loved how Katie included QR codes so that participants can access what she has to offer kind of in more depth later on. So I took screenshots of a lot of her QR codes so that I can tweet those out later. But clearly her system is very well thought out, and she does use technology in such beneficial ways to really support language development, which is amazing because not all educational technology is created equal. And she's really using it in a lot of positive ways. I loved the phone that she had, so that these are kindergarten students that she's working with. Kindergarten students accessing Flipgrid to practice speaking. It's amazing. And she talked about how interacting with technology prepares them for WIDA, or in my case, ELPA 21, that students have to use technology to take the test. And so having them engage in practice that's fun. Who doesn't want to talk into the red telephone? That was so fun. But they're really getting great practice in the skills that they need to demonstrate and in the format they need to demonstrate it for those kind of high stakes assessments.
And how about the layout of that classroom? I took a picture of that and tweeted it out. I mean, it looks more like a coffee shop than a classroom, which is just wonderful. And she mentioned it may not look like a typical classroom. Well, I think a typical classroom should look like that, particularly for kindergartners. And the phone, I was so glad you took that picture because I didn't have time to snap that pic, but really, really well done.
And especially if kindergartners can do it, anyone can do it. If we can put tools in the hands of 5-year-olds, imagine what high schoolers and middle schoolers and even other upper elementary schoolers can do. It's really phenomenal, kind of the high expectations she has, but also the carefully scaffolded support so that students can really be independent in their work in the classroom. Valentina, what presentation did you watch?
I watched Beth Skelton's presentation on vocabulary, and she is amazing. I've never seen Beth face to face. I've only tweeted with her and interacted on Twitter. So it was really nice to kind of get to know her, at least like a live version of her on Google Hangouts or whatever it is. But what I loved most about her presentation is that she shared a strategy, a technique that teachers could implement tomorrow or Monday if they're teaching summer school right away, something very systemic, very thought out, very natural for vocabulary instruction. Also, she used the 3 principles that Maria and Andrea shared. The whole presentation was gamified, it was social, it was storified. And so as an audience, I felt like I was really included in her presentation, and the vocabulary that she shared and the instruction was really relevant to students. What I really thought was powerful as well is that, and I took a picture of the slide, she shared with us, like in a typical day, students, especially at the secondary level, they have such a heavy load of vocabulary, the math vocabulary that they're interacting with, the science vocabulary, the social studies vocabulary, and then they go into maybe an elective, and that vocabulary that they're having to interact with is also very high and technical. And so when we implement the strategies that Beth shares with us, we can really lift that level of comprehension. So I really feel like if I were in a classroom or if I were at a district level, I could take this presentation that Beth created and either implement the strategy that she shared, or I could share it at a PD session with teachers and they could easily use what she taught us. She was magnificent. It was really good. And I can't wait to share some of the strategies that she shared. Did anyone check it out? Anyone else?
Well, I attended Justin Garcia's session on total physical response and sign language, and that was really interesting because I think many of us are familiar with TPR, and I think it's typically used, at least how I use it in the classroom, is for sort of concrete words and actions: sit down, stand up, jump, tap, point. And what was really interesting is he talked about it in the context of sign language, but also just any kind of, not necessarily formal sign language, but coming up with movements to represent other less concrete concepts, like in a poem, and how to use that to reinforce vocabulary. And that was interesting. And unfortunately, I left a little early to be on the panel. He was going to talk about how to use TPR to reinforce phonics. So I'm looking forward to going back and watching that last portion of it. But it's interesting just to sort of expand my own understanding of it beyond those words that you always see in every TPR list of the words that you teach with that. So that was real interesting.
Before we move on, I just also want to give a shout to Justin, who has recently started a queer chat for teachers. So a time for teachers to come together to discuss and engage in issues for LGBTQ students and also LGBTQ teachers. So I will have to double check on the time and when that takes place, but he's doing that weekly now, which is really just a great movement for people to have a place and time to come together to talk about all of those issues around our queer students and being queer educators. And it's also not just for queer educators, but open to anyone who wants to engage in discussions around those topics. So go, Justin. Good for you for doing that.
Second that.
Yeah. Tan, what presentation did you watch?
So I multitask between all of the sessions to make sure everyone's okay. And I specifically watched Sarah Saeed's presentation. It was so great. Someone said, you had me at Beyond the Kidney Table. Because her thing is really about co-teaching and co-planning, like where he said, because I'm really passive. And she said, we gotta not do that. We have to say, her quote was, we have to move beyond the kidney table and be at the forefront of our instructional teams. So she said, when we're meeting with our co-teachers and our educators, we have to speak up as much as possible. But I would add, we have to do it in a way that can be heard. Because we can be strong at times. And so I love that idea of her saying, yes, speak up, because our kids, because she said she had a metaphor of we're super women and we're supermen. And so we have heroes and they're masks and they're costumes, and we don't have to walk around with those disguises anymore. We need to show, we need to advocate for our kids on their behalf. And so it's another it really links back to Andrea and Maria's presentation about the need for co-planning, but really putting a strong emphasis on like saying, don't take a passive role in it, take a really active role.
So on that theme, what would any of you plan to do with this great information to take it beyond Twitter? So to take it to either your campus or to share it with other educators who may not be on Twitter? What are your plans to kind of get this information out there?
For my part, I mean, I sort of consider myself, I had just all these wonderful people around me, and I kind of try to curate great information and put it out there. So I'm hoping to get in touch with these folks and amplify their voices, either through the podcast that I host or through blog posts in different ways. I mean, there's just so much stuff out here that we can get out in various media. Obviously, this way, having videos, having information out here is great. But I would love to collaborate with anybody else and just try to amplify voices. Whereas I'm not going back to a campus, I'm going to a place hopefully where we have a bit of a microphone. We have a literal microphone, but I'd love to get these folks' voices heard. And I think, in terms of there's just so, if I were still in the classroom, these were made, at least the ones I saw, in such a way that they're so easy to incorporate either all of it or bits and pieces of it. I mean, just Katie's. I mean, if I go back and take a look at those QR codes, I can say, I'm going to use this, tomorrow if I have an iPad in my class, or I can say, I'm going to structure an entire unit or an entire year through all of the information that was given. So I'd be curious to hear what folks say that are actually going back to their campuses.
And go ahead, Larry.
No, one simple thing that I'm going to be doing is this summer I'm going to be leading a day-long training session for staff on teaching ELLs. And as I plan it, I'm going to keep in mind that idea of social, storify, and gamify.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think one of the great things about Virtuelle is that for those who are inclined, it can be hours and hours and hours of quality professional development at their fingertips that they can access on summer vacation, or, a quick 20-minute, 25-minute session and learn something that's really applicable to whatever their instructional context is, whether they're going to present, like Valentina, present to teachers in kind of a professional development setting, where you can add some additional tricks and tips, or if it's me taking it to my classroom. But it's also something that leaders can break down into small bits and pieces to make it really palatable for those who might not have as much time to engage in professional development, or maybe who aren't there with that desire to learn like we are. It's just a really great spectrum of being able to provide information in a lot of different ways for many levels of interest and people who are interested in different elements of teaching.
I know some districts do online conference days. Mm-hmm. For example, they'll have a professional development day where teachers will just watch online conferences. And so this would be a great platform to offer some ELL conferences or PD sessions, and there are certificates available. So after watching some of the presentations, they can download a certificate and share it with their either their principal or administrator, whoever it is at their district level, that they would share that certificate with to get credit for the sessions that they watched. So I think sharing this with either their professional development department or their administrator as they're organizing professional learning days would be awesome. I mean, now we have so many virtuals because this is already our third year, right? Mm-hmm. Third year. So there's so many that they can choose from. It'd be awesome.
Carol and Ton recorded a wonderful podcast at some point in the past few months with Deb talking about how to take this virtual concept and bring it to your own school. Because what's really powerful is hearing the voices of the people in the room or within the district. And so I would have to go back and look and see what that is, but maybe I'll tweet out that link later. So if anyone's interested in kind of creating their own virtual, that's what we're looking to do in my district, is to take it from wonderful speakers that you don't know to wonderful speakers that you do know who are well-versed in your specific context. And maybe it's somebody who's familiar with your particular curriculum or your particular schedule or where you are in that collaboration and co-teaching process. But hear from those experts and voices in the room.
And how many times do we hear educators say that they want more choice in professional development?
Yes.
That's what this is. You know, you get to choose from the sessions that you feel like you need to learn more about. So it's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great way to kind of apply that EdCamp style PD to schools and to really kind of bring people out of their silos. I mean, there's experts in every school that are sort of, doing their thing every day, and they don't necessarily have the opportunity like this to go out and talk to their own colleagues in their own schools. And that just really kind of makes people more respected, and I think gives people an opportunity to share things that they're really, most people kind of really excited to share.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I look forward to watching all of the videos and taking the time to do that. And for everyone else who's watching, please tweet and continue tweeting and continue sharing the parts that you love, the parts that you plan to use, and really share that recognition for the presenters who worked hard to put together information so that it's readily available for the masses. So a huge thank you to everyone who's participating today. Thanks to Ton and Carol for putting this together. And thank you to all of you for being part of the panel and just joining in on the discussion of all the great learning that's taking place today.
And thank you for being a great moderator.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks, Katie. It was nice to be on the other side of the moderation.
Great. Well, take care and enjoy the rest of the presentations.
Great job, Katie.
Okay.
Everyone.
Great. Bye.
Thanks again.
Wow.